All right, good afternoon, all. My name is Hope Allwine, and I'm a digital accessibility specialist here at Accessible Web. We're going to be going over the basics for WCAG for starters, and then diving into some easy fixes that can be made without a lot of technical knowledge. It does require a little bit of HTML and CSS knowledge, but with the help of the Accessible Web Helper extension and this webinar, we'll get you started. We'll be covering link purpose, contrast, headings, and text alternatives. All right, let's get started. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, is developed by an international consortium that is dedicated to ensuring that there are guidelines to make the internet more accessible for everyone. WCAG is based on 4 accessibility principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. There are 3 levels of conformance, including A, AA, and AAA, with A being the lowest level of conformance and AAA exceeding expectations. It is important to note that there are several versions of WCAG, and updates occur regularly. A best practice is to utilize WCAG 2.2 AA standard in the Accessible Web Helper extension or in RAMP manual audits for your website, as it is one step above most legal requirements. All versions are backwards compatible and do not cancel out previous versions unless something has become obsolete, like parsing. For a deeper dive into manual auditing and the WCAG requirements, I highly recommend checking out our Manual Audit Monday web series. It goes into more detail for each test and identifies failures according to WCAG success criteria. Okay, we've covered a little bit about WCAG. Let's get to fixing some of those problems. All right, we're starting with link purpose as it requires the least amount of coding knowledge, as it focuses on the context of text and visuals around a link. Link purpose is a vital component of accessibility, as it helps users understand what the link is going to do before they click on it. If a link is navigating to another page, then the link should indicate that through context. There are a few examples on the slide demonstrating good and bad use of link purpose. It's the same sentence, but the link is changed. Does the word blood have enough context for the user to know that they're heading to the American Red Cross website and to the locator for blood drives? No, it could be a definition of blood, or it could be a vampire website. Now, it is possible to have a combination of components to help with link purpose, like some graphics or images can be used to help give context to a link. Check out this screenshot from accessibleweb.com and the use of an image, heading, and a description to help give purpose to the link beneath it. The link for Learn More at the bottom has a purpose from the context of the description and the heading above it. There is a helper in the Accessible Web Helper extension to help identify links and evaluate each of the links and see if the context is sufficient. Let's start going a little bit deeper with contrast fixes. Contrast refers to the differential between the foreground, like a text color, against a background, or the comparison between lighter and darker components. The higher the contrast ratio, the easier it is to read the page, or read the text, or perceive parts of an image. It's important to have sufficient contrast ratios so everyone can read the information without straining their eyes, or if they have difficulty perceiving colors, can still identify key elements or text without it disappearing into another color they cannot identify. WCAG requires specific contrast ratios for text and non-text elements. For text contrast, the ratio must be at least 4.5 to 1, and for non-text elements like graphics, icons, buttons, and other components, it must be at least 3 to 1. There's an example of good contrast and bad contrast on the image. See how the white text sticks out on the navy background? The more contrast there is between the foreground and background, the easier it is to differentiate between the two. If you look at the bad example, you'll see the orange text disappears into the background. You could use the Accessible Web Contrast Checker to compare colors with the eyedropper tool, as indicated with the arrow, or by entering in hex codes, RGB values, or HSL values, indicated by the second arrow. The automated scanner in the Accessible Web Helper can pick up some contrast issues, but it may not pick up all of them. Common errors that we find is that people use a light background and then a slightly darker text, or vice versa. If your color contrast ratio is too low, it may mean that you need to either darken the text color or darken the background, or vice versa. You can use the accessible web contrast checker to test out different shades of color to meet the required contrast ratio. Sometimes you may be limited to colors within a branding guide, and that's okay. You can test your brand's colors with white text or black text to see if it meets the sufficient contrast ratio. If the branding colors are too similar, you can use them as accents for components like borders or decorative graphics. All right, let's keep going on to headings. Headings give context for the content beneath them, helping the user determine what to expect in that section. Headings should create a visual and programmatic map of the content on the page, ranging from the top level, H1, to the smallest, H6. You want to make sure it makes sense as you go down the web page. An easy way to identify what headings are assigned on your website already, use the Accessible Web Helper extension to highlight the headings. If you find a heading that's out of order or is used for other purposes, then right-click and hit Inspect, which will open the developer tools to find it within the code. Once you find it, then you'll know where to look in the original code to change it and make that easy fix. You can either remove the heading or change the level of the heading. If something looks like a heading, then it should be coded as a heading. Remember that headings are used to create a hierarchy within the page and should not be used to emphasize text or make text stand out. Use CSS or other native HTML elements like the strong tag to bold your text within a web page. You can see in my example image that sometimes if you use a heading, it can make things a little wonky for the user. Once you've got your headings in order, it's time to move on to another easy fix. A text alternative is giving users an alternative to pictures, images, or graphics in text so they don't miss out on the context if they cannot see or visually comprehend images or animations. Let's define a few concepts first. There are two types of images: decorative, meaning it's there for visual aesthetics, or a meaningful image. It has a function or purpose. Decorative images should be skipped by assistive technology as they do not add to the purpose of the page. To allow a screen reader or other assistive technology to skip a decorative image, leave the alt text blank. The Accessible Web Helper extension has a tool to identify all the images on the page and if they are coded as decorative or meaningful. Assess each image and determine if they are coded correctly for their purpose. Then if you need to make changes, you can again right-click, hit Inspect, which opens the developer tools, and pinpoint the image's location within the code. If alt text is needed, you add the alt text as seen on the first sentence of the slide, attribute to the image tag in the original code. If you designed your website using a website builder like Weebly or WordPress, or design components using something like Figma or Canva, most of them allow you to add alt text whenever you're uploading or editing the images. So you can do that to add alt text and then update your website to fix any errors that might be popping up. Another good practice for alt text is to create a short and simple description for the image and not a description that rivals a novel. If a meaningful image has purpose, like it links to another site, then that should be in the alt text. If there is text on an image that is nowhere else on the screen, that should also be in the alt text. Another way to add context for an image that is complex, like a graph, is to have a caption that describes the text being presented in the image. All right, now we're going to look at a couple of examples of text alternatives. Okay, so imagine a scenario where a user is seeking information on a library website for a monthly book club selection. The first image is of a heading, August book club selection, an image, a book cover of The Hobbit, and text beneath the image. Click on the image to go to Goodreads for description and purchase options. The alt text for this image is Goodreads page on J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. If the user looks at this image by itself, they cannot tell it's a link. Therefore, the alt text will help with that, and the text below the image helps the user identify the image as a link. The next image is a card component of an image, which is the book cover, the heading, August book club selection, details, search for library availability for this month's book club selection, and a button that reads library availability. The image is a version of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit with an illustration of a dragon sleeping on a pile of gold. Because of the surrounding information in the button, the alt text required for the book cover is going to be focusing more on the main elements of the image, including the book title and the author, and then the basic description of a dragon sleeping on a pile of gold. The stock image of library stacks is purely for aesthetics, so it should be coded as a decorative with a blank alt text. Each of these images are good practices for alt text, but it really comes down to the individual website, their images, and what alt text is needed. That wraps up our easy fixes. There are other easy fixes like page titles and language parts that don't require a lot of technical know how to fix them. Be sure to read the remediation recommendations for each failure, as many of them have the steps to help fix the problem. All right, how can Accessible Web help? Accessible Web software can be used in two main ways, either the Accessible Web Helper extension or the manual auditing tools in RAMP. Both can be used to help run automated scanning to help identify WCAG failures and recommend remediation steps. It's a good idea to start with automated scanning to identify key failures up front, and it's super easy to get this done. But the fixes may be a little bit more work depending on the situation. So that's why we didn't cover it in this webinar, but it's definitely a great first step to do. And Accessible Web, we are here to help. We assist with a myriad of ways with consulting and training. We have manual audits that can be done by accessibility specialists like myself, and provide documentation to help signify that you're starting your journey with accessibility and you're making your website more accessible. We're happy to help and here to help you along on your journey.
Awesome.
All right,
Thank you.
that wraps it up.